So, okay. And then I'd like to take and talk to you a little bit about lures and what we're doing right now and what I'm going to be doing in the future. And right now, you know, it's still pretty much solid winter mode. I mean, the water's cold. It's in the 50s. The water's clear. You know, you can use the clear water to your advantage, and I'll tell you about that. But, you know, fish are kind of moving slow, but they do have to eat to live, luckily for us. And you put yourself in a couple of different of the right situations right now, you can have numbers of fish days better than you will in the summer sometimes. Wintertime can be a fantastic time to catch fish. For one, there's going to be less people, less pressure, and you know, there's a lot of different things going on they're not always going when the water gets warm. Well, for instance, we're going to talk a little bit about striped bass fishing in the Cape Fear River. We've got an awesome fishery for them down there. They've been there forever, and I talk to people all the time, so I've lived here my whole life and never thought about going down to try to catch a striper in the Cape Fear River. Well, folks, there's a lot of fish down there, and their state agencies and some other people like the Cape Fear River Watch put a lot of work into restoring our fishery. And although there's a moratorium on the fish, you're not allowed to keep and to eat right now or take them from the river, but you can sure enjoy catching them. And when I first started fishing for them, I'd have a time trying to figure out what to do. Couldn't really find anybody that knew anything about it, and the people that did they didn't want to tell me about it. So I just had to go down there and do the work myself. And you know, thinking of them as a bass, when I started trying to figure out how to fish for them, I just recently gotten the boat that I fish now with a trolling motor, and it's set up for light tackle inshore fishing. And when you look at the Cape Fear River, I mean, the banks of the place are littered with old shipwrecks, cypress trees, cypress knees, and it looks like the fishiest place. The whole river looks so fishy. You're like, where do I start? Well, I'll tell you what you do. You go downtown to that new nice boat ramp, put your boat in, and whichever way the current's running, you get on that bank and you can ride it if you got a trolling motor and beat the shorelines with some lures that I'm going to show you. One of the secrets to the fishing for those striped bass in the Cape Fear River is it needs to be a bright colored lure. They'll eat dark colored lures, but they really like stuff that's white, chartreuse, and hot pink in colors that really stand out. And even though that looks unnatural, you put it in the dark colored, tannic waters of the Cape Fear River, it doesn't look so unnatural and it almost looks like an off-white. But it shows up well to them. And the Cape Fear River striped bass will eat about anything. Now that I've fished a whole lot for them, I found out they'll eat anything you throw to the bank. But one thing that I'll fish something like this all day long, which is a 5-inch jerk shad soft plastic. And there's 1,000,001 different varieties of this. And anything that's in the 5-inch size that's white or chartreuse and a jerk shad, they make a lot of baits like this that some have paddle tails, some have fork tails, some have just a straight tail. I prefer the baits that have a fork tail or a straight tail. They got a quicker fall, and a lot of times you're moving along in a quick current and you want this bait to get down fast. So this bait, rigged in a weedless way with a hook that's going to sit in the bait to keep it less likely from getting snagged, is the best route to go in the Cape Fear River. You take this bait like this in a hook that looks a lot like a hook that you would use for largemouth bass fishing. And you know, over the years, a lot of people started to get more familiar with weedless style hooks like this, and they come in a lot of different sizes, some with the weight in the belly, some with the weight in the head. And that's not important. I prefer the weighted head ones. I like the ones that sink real quick and not fall sideways, because I like it to get down quick. And I suggest when you're going down there to first try it, you take this kind of lure like this, and to rig it, you take the hook, and I found when they have a spring like this, if you take the eye of the hook, stick it into the bait, and make yourself a good place for that corkscrew to screw into that bait, that's going to save you some time right there. And then if you ever put a corkscrew in a bottle of wine, you find this point, it's the same deal. Find the point on it, you insert it into the hole that you started, give it a twist or two. And once you just get it started, then you kind of look on and say, okay, I want to drive this thing straight in the bait. And you just twist it onto the hook and keep going all the way up until you get the bait close to the top of the spring. And then when you decide to put the hook through the bait, it has to come through the bait and ride somewhat like this. Okay? So what I like to do is take my thumb and mark my bait after I lay it to the side of each particular bait. Lay it to the side and say, okay, I need to come through right there. Come through in the bottom, straight up through the middle. And then the hook will rest right along inside, and it somewhat stays hidden, and it'll keep you from getting snagged up so bad in a lot of the cypress knees and things on the bank. Now the first couple times you go down there to try to do the fishing down there, go when the water's at a lower tide state. I find that the fishing's better when the water's lower. You get a lot prettier colored water, the darker tannic color from upriver come down towards the downtown area at the bottoms of this tide within a few hours of the switch, and the first of the rod are going to be your clearest parts of the water most of the time in the tide. And that's when you can go down there and see what you're up against on the banks. Because if you were to go down there on a full-blooded, blown out big high tide and be throwing and working these shorelines, you would be getting snagged a lot more than you know. And after a few times at lower water, you'll know areas that are a little cleaner and a little bit nastier. And of course the fish like the nasty stuff. So when you fish those nastier places, it's easier to get along the edges of it when you can at least see the tips of the cypress knees and things sticking out. And just take these baits with a, put your trolling motor down, get yourself in a direction riding with the tide, and when you're fishing natural shorelines without any man-made structure, just cast that lure within inches of the bank, bring it back, kind of walk. I tell people walk on your tippy toes for the first few feet. Don't let it just drop to the bottom right when it hits. Let it slide it off till it just starts to come off the bank. 4 or 5 feet, and then start to slow down, and you really need to fish these baits slow. You fish them so slow that when you come, you really want to, you kind of have to take up for that when you're fishing the bank. You want to throw further ahead, so you'll get this bait, get down, and you're going to get a good throw about halfway back at least to where you're at, on your retrieve. Now, there's a lot, you can tie this with a loop knot, like the old clench knot, this with an overhand circle. Put the jig on, and a loop knot works good, or you can tie this lure right on. And I'll go into that if you want me to. I'll teach you that loop knot, but it just makes a loop in the end of the line that you can trust is strong. It gives the lure a little bit more action, helps it to get going head first downhill before it feels anything and gets that head down on the lure. And this one in particular, this hook particularly is my favorite brand, and I didn't have any in a pack. But this brand of hook works great. It's called a Stanley. Stanley Jig Company makes this as this is one of their weedless hooks. It's called a Wedge Max, and I like the way it deflects the cypress knees, and it's a little wider than the hook point, so it helps you stay clean. But like I said, there's a lot of different baits. With the plastics, with the stripers, trust me, you can throw a lot of different things. If you throw this against the bank with these, it's going to do you some good. Now, when they hit it, it's not like a largemouth. You don't want to let them swim off and say, okay, I'm getting ready to cross his eyes. When you feel them, bang it, set the hook very hard. Have yourself in a position where if you're fishing this plastic, your line's up at about 8 or 10 o'clock. Be ready. If you feel one, don't dump. You got about enough time to get a half crank to get down just another foot and really cross his eyes. Once you come tight, you can relax a little bit. And the plastic is going to do you justice on that. And I got to move along a little bit. But another bait that works great for the striped bass is diving plugs. And they make a lot of different style of diving plugs, like the ones that you use for bass, like this, like here. If you've got freshwater bass plugs with a deep diving lip, say a 12 to 15 foot diving range, that's the range of the water column. I like to try to use these plugs. Some dive deeper, some shallower, 12 to 15 feet. You might get a little more depth out of one if you run it back a little at your longest part of your cast, or at a short distance you might get 8-10 feet out of it, but that's to start at a range of depth. The 12 to 15 range will be good. Now, a lot of different bass style baits really work good for those striped bass. They're built to throw, they're built for casting and winding. A lot of these baits, like this X-Wrap and this X-Wrap bait, is a little bit lighter. It doesn't throw as well. These Yozuri plugs that come in a great variety of bright colors also work really good for the striped bass in the Cape Fear River, in a hot pink, chartreuse, and white. And they have some reflective stuff on them. They do a good job, but don't seem to cast as well as a lot of the bass style lures do. So either way, now you can go downtown and you can use these plugs and throw them up, working a bank with the current, throwing at an angle, pulling them back to you. You won't feel a lot of drag. You're going to be moving along with them. you know, and it won't give you, it's not going to be as hard to wind in as you think. Cool thing about a crankbait is no matter who's throwing it, you know if they're throwing it and it's hitting the bank and they're winding it back, it's going to run the depth and it's going to be in the zone that you want them to. Where a lot of times people want to fish too fast with a plastic you're not trusting or not really knowing if they're getting down deep enough. That crankbait's going to get them where they need to be, and all they got to do is be able to throw it and wind it in. Now you can either cast to the striped bass or you can go down there and try trolling. Now with the trolling, you use these same crankbaits that you'd have tied on. If I go down there, I'll have a soft plastic like this. I'll have a crankbait tied on, one for each person. And if we decide that we work down 150 yards of shoreline, we got a bite or two on the way, we'll say, hey, well, let's give our arms a break. Let's troll back up against the current. And that way, you can control your boat at a very low rate of speed, at bare steerage way speed, and you can just, as low and slow as your boat will go and make way moving against this current, and put out 2 crankbaits. One on, just 2 is plenty, because when you do finally get that fire drill, it's not, you don't want to have too much stuff to clear and all the current and stuff. But if you run 2 baits, one on one side, one on the other, and you just try to stay right on the edge of the shoreline, watching a depth recorder to see yourself being right on the edge of the deep water. If you're going to run a 10 to 12 foot bait, you want to try to stay in the 10 to 12 foot range, which is going to be just off the shoreline, and it's going to move. Some places, with experience, you'll find that are deep right against the bank, and some places are going to be deeper a little further off. But in time, you'll figure out where and when, and you can use that crankbait. You know, you can go down there to lower water, troll against the current rising, and fish these crankbaits, trolling them. And if you don't have a trolling motor, or if you just want to, you know, just try it. If it's really cold, if it's windy as can be, and you want to do it, there's times really when that trolling method will work. And I try to do the casting for it unless it's blowing or if it's real hard conditions, or we just need to give our arms a break. You know, that will also give you that. And that, with that kind of stuff, the striped bass, they'll be down there they're there all year round. They do make a spring run. You know, here in between now and Easter, the fish will take off and they'll try to go upriver to make a spawning run, and they'll end up in at the first lock and dam, and they'll make it through the first lock and dam, and they'll make it to the second in an arch rapid way that was built in the last few years to help these fish get upriver. So they do try to make a spring run, and that would be the only time of the year when you don't really probably want to go downtown to try to catch them. They might still be some stragglers, but I'd say, you know, late. So 1st of April and on, I kind of usually give them a break because a lot of other stuff's getting ready to start happening. Been doing this all winter, and a lot of the fish will be trying to leave. But once they get back after a short period of about 8 weeks up that dam, and they'll come right back downtown, and you can expect them to be in the downtown Wilmington area. And I'd say from the state ports all the way up to the I-440 Beltline Bridge in the Northeast River, they're going to be there for about 8 months of the year. It's always there for you. If you're looking for something to catch during the colder months where something that'll hit a hard bait or a soft plastic and give you a great fight, they don't care how cold the water is. Even when it's in the 30s, they bite.